We are recording.
Okay. Hi folks, as you're coming in, just gonna let people know that we are gonna wait a few more minutes for more guests to arrive. And we are recording this event, so if you don't want to be recorded, please have your video off. And also please keep your mic on mute throughout the event, unless you are directly asking a question. We're just trying to minimize any kind of distractions. Yeah, and I'll make a few more announcements as we get more folks joining us.
And I just want to remind those that are part of our vendors to please message me directly on chat so that I can do our magic. Hi, Tim. There we go.
All right, welcome everyone. As you're arriving, we're gonna wait just a couple more minutes. I know it's only 1 o'clock just now, so yeah, we're just gonna wait a few more minutes to give people time to arrive. I'm gonna give another reminder that we are currently recording this event so that people can have access to it later if they weren't able to attend today, or if there's something you want to look back on later. So if you don't want your face to be recorded, please keep your video off. And we will ask folks to keep their mics on mute throughout the event, unless of course you're asking a question directly. Just trying to minimize any distractions. And we also will be providing all the information and resources that our community organization representatives are going to be sharing with us after the event. So you will have all that information later. And We also have closed captioning available if you need that. It's down at the bottom. You can see it says CC on your Zoom settings. You can click on that and hit show subtitles, and you'll be able to see the automated subtitles for ease of understanding. And if you are interested in working with allyship around fighting for economic and housing justice for queer and trans communities, or if you would like to be a part of our housing or economic justice committees, you can email at info@allyship.org. And we're going to begin in a few minutes.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Taylor. I am so excited that you're here. And as we are still, there are some people that are from organizations here. Please put in the chat to Katrina or myself so that we can make sure that you are given access to being able to show your slides. That being said, it is 1:03 and I'm going to get us started off to get us going on today's event. We're very excited to have you all here. As we always start in our program, LGBTQ allyship acknowledges that we are occupied on traditional lands of the Duwamish people, who are the original stewards of this land and continue to live here today. And we invite you to contribute a gift to Duwamish people through Real Rent Duwamish. And want to thank you for just acknowledging the ground that we're on, where we live, the sky, the earth, the plants, that are all of the people of the Duwamish people. So thank you for just hearing that. We also want to thank you for joining us today for LGBTQ Allyship North Seattle Housing Fair. That is what we are doing today. We would like to first thank our North Seattle Housing Committee members. Some of them are here. Mallory Mallory has joined us to support in our committee members, Kels, Trisha, and Barbara. We want to thank you all for helping put this event together. I also want to thank our volunteers that have helped us in the background today, and that would be Tim and Kelsey, and we are so delighted to be able to have support from our volunteers, support from our committee, And as you can tell, we also have our amazing staff, which is Katrina, and then there is Yenny, who is in the background doing a lot of the pieces here too. So I want to just point out that we can't do this alone. It is our committee members, it is our staff, and it is our volunteers. So if you want to support in any way, want to be on a committee, want to be on, be one of the volunteers for LGBTQ allyship, please let us know. You can connect with us through info@allyship, or fill out one of our forms, which we'll end up putting up throughout the day or throughout the 3 hours. And you can email us or fill out one of those forms for the committee or volunteers. And we will be putting those links up. And then lastly, I want to say a special thank you to our amazing sponsor for their continued support with LGBTQ allyship and our work together, and that's Housing Development Consortium. I'm probably saying that wrong again. So thank you again to our amazing sponsor. So a bit about the event today. Today's event is about connecting with community, connecting with resources, and finding out what we can do collectively to advocate for housing rights and housing stability. We have 11 amazing organizations here today, and they are here to let you know about programs and answer questions that you may have about how to access resources, how to connect, and about your rights as a tenant. We also have 3 amazing panelists that will be talking about legislative updates, along with about laws about being that are being put place to protect you, and discuss the Stay Housed, Stay Healthy campaign and its impacts on the renters. But first, we're going to hear from a renter's rights. Our first renter right around renter right plans, payment plan from Katrina.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Taylor. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. During our breakout rooms, when we're going to hear more from our community organizations and our vendors, our representatives. We're going to share resources and such. So we are going to get a chance to learn more about mediation with landlords regarding evictions from our guest, Marilyn, from the Dispute Resolution Center. But I'm going to just briefly introduce this idea of payment plans now. So as you can see, your landlord must accept a payment plan for rent owed during the eviction moratorium and for 6 months following the end of Seattle's civil emergency. And of course, lately, when we talk about payment plans, it's in that context of eviction moratorium and as that ends. I'm also going to talk a little bit later about other ways that payment plans come into play. So this is, like I said, this is a requirement. If your landlord has to accept if you are requesting a payment plan. And here are some ideas of payment plans that you can make with your landlord. So you can also make an alternative arrangement to these ideas, but as you can see, the landlord must let you make 3 equal monthly payments in a row if you are 1 month overdue, as well as letting you make 3 to 5 equal monthly payments in a row if you're 2 months overdue. And if it's above that, then you can make 6 equal monthly payments in a row. So when you make a payment plan, you do need to work with your landlord, meaning that you can have a conversation with them via Zoom or phone or in person, depending on if potentially, they live in the building you live in. And you can also send a letter to them requesting a payment plan. But anything that you communicate and decide with your landlord needs to be in writing. That's for your protection and to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And yeah, it's just really important that anytime you communicate with your landlord about your rental unit, that is in writing and documented, and that you retain a copy of it. So like I said, all of this is super relevant right now because of COVID and the eviction moratorium ending. But it is important to know that you can also request a payment plan when you are moving into your apartment or rental unit. You know, moving is often extremely costly, right? You have first month's rent, security deposit, move-in fees, sometimes a pet damage deposit, and last month's rent often is also requested. And you can also request to pay those via payment plan in installments. And the typical installments are going to vary depending on the length of your lease. But just as with the eviction moratorium related payment plans, you can also request an alternative arrangement. And as long as you're paying according to the agreed upon installments with your landlord, both for this eviction moratorium follow-up as well as in the standard non-pandemic circumstance, as long as you're paying according to that plan, your landlord cannot charge you any additional fees for having a payment plan. Yeah, so, and I just want to offer that these payment plans don't apply to you if you live in a single family home with your landlord, or if you live in like a backyard cottage on the property that your landlord also lives in. That is something that you would need to communicate with your landlord based on a relationship you have with them, but the legal protection isn't as, it's not as covered. So that's just some info about payment plans. Yeah, please let me know if you have any questions. I see there's a couple in the chat. I don't know if Taylor, if you can read those.
Yeah. So what if I don't have any money to put towards rent at all? What can she do since she can't evict me?
That is a great question. And like I said, we are going to have a representative from the Dispute Resolution Center who can definitely address that in more detail later on. But the issue is that if you don't have any money to put toward rent at all, then you cannot be evicted right now, regardless. Yeah, and yeah, like I said, Marilyn will talk more about what that is going to look like in detail. And I also see a question about landlords saying no to payment plans. So legally, no, they cannot say no to payment plan right now in response to anything COVID related. I think, you know, if you offer an alternative payment plan beyond the ones that are sort of within the rental rights code, then they can say no. But if you say something within sort of what's already a predetermined installment plan, then they legally have to take that payment plan and accept that you can pay in installments. Any final questions on that? Oh, sorry. Do they have to accept payment plans after the end of the emergency? So it's definitely a good idea to start setting up a payment plan earlier rather than later, because you know, it is going to be, I think, trickier. And the moratorium is set to end at the end of June. But then we have up to 6 months after that, where this is all still in place, that you are still protected. You cannot be evicted based on payment issues for the 6 months after the moratorium. But yeah, it is a good idea to try to get a payment plan in place with your landlord prior to the end of the moratorium if you foresee that that's going to be an issue. But again, I'm going to maybe hold off now because I think we're trying to get into more detailed questions, and I want to make sure that I don't say anything incorrect, and that Marilyn can really clarify those things a little bit later on.
And I will also say that you do have 6 months after the moratorium to set up a payment plan. Yes. So it's not it's not going to be an immediate thing, and you do have opportunities to create that payment plan and negotiate. And it is about negotiating the payment plan. And Marilyn will definitely be going over some of the process around that. But, and if your answers are not completely answered at this moment or later, you can always contact us, and we are more than happy to work with you, and we can connect you up with anybody else.
Yes, and as Jenny just put in the chat, the eviction moratorium is scheduled to end June 30th. Yeah, I don't know about the civil emergency either, actually.
The civil emergency will be announced when that ends, but that's not, that's different from the moratorium. So when the governor and the mayor decide when the city civil emergency and the state, they will make those announcements. I don't know that either.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Mallory, for putting in the chat that about the rental assistance program. Please, folks, take a look at that and sign up for that as well if you need it. Okay, like I said, we're gonna move on from payment plans and talk about another tenant protection, which you may have heard of. It's definitely something that's been in legislation lately. It's called the Just Cause Eviction Ordinance, and it requires landlords to have at least one of 18 identified reasons to evict a tenant. So we're going to be learning more during the speaker panel about current efforts to expand renter protections even further under this ordinance. But right now we're going to have a brief video made by one of our community members, and they're going to explain some of these just causes that landlords must have to provide an eviction notice. And after the video, please, of course, ask any questions, put any in the chat as you need to.
Are you worried that your landlord might evict you for prejudicial reasons? I'm Morella, and this is Paco, and we can relate. Thankfully, the Just Cause Eviction Ordinance can stop that from happening. In 1980, tenants and the tenants union came together to pass this law and stop landlords from unjustly evicting people in Seattle. And right now, folks are trying to expand it so that it protects all renters in Washington state. So how does it work, and who does it protect? Unfortunately, the ordinance does not apply to renters with fixed-term leases. But if you're a month-to-month renter, there are only 18 legal reasons why you can be evicted. Some of these reasons are consistently paying rent late, violating your rental agreement, or if your landlord wants to move into the unit. If your landlord lies to get you to move out, you can sue them in small claims court for $2,000 in damages. For a complete list of reasons, check out our description for a link to the Department of Construction and Inspection's Renter's Handbook. By the way, your landlord must state one of the 18 reasons in a written notice to terminate vacancy. And typically, it must be sent to you 20 days before the end of your rental period. If you have any questions or feel like your rights are being violated, please contact LGBTQ allyship. Bye!
Okay, hopefully that provided some information. I did provide a link in the chat that will take you to a PDF that has a summary of all of those reasons from the city of Seattle. And I'm seeing that Tracy's asking a question about how to prove your landlord is lying. So that is, again, I think something that Marilyn might be able to help us understand a little bit more. Sorry to put so much on you, Marilyn. But that is a tricky thing. You know, again, I think this is why we stress that any communication that you do with your landlord needs to be in writing, so that you can, you know, prove what's going on, you know, prove anything that you've asked your landlord about, or if there's anything that they have written to you, or if they're threatening you verbally, but that's not in writing, then, you know, that they don't have anything to prove that they've had that conversation with you. Yeah, Dulcie, please.
Yeah.
I was just going to say a couple of things. First of all, I don't know if somebody else is going to talk about this later, but the state has just passed Just Cause that will apply to the rest of the state. And there are some things in it that are not exactly harmonized with our city just cause eviction because we've had it since the 80s, like the presenter said, but it's new to Washington state. So there's going to be some period of time where we try and knit those two things together. But to answer the main question, which was how do you prevent your landlord from lying? So first of all, the landlord has to give you the notice in writing. They have to state the just cause. And if you suspect that the landlord's being disingenuous, like they say they're moving in their daughter or son, or they're moving in themselves, or they say they're going to sell the property, you can actually call the city, you can call the Renting in Seattle helpline, and you can tell the folks there, and they will require the owner to certify for the record. So the owner would actually have to sign a sworn declaration that they intend to follow through. Sometimes they might even have to specify which immediate family member is moving in. And if they don't follow through, first of all, if they don't sign this declaration, that would be a defense to eviction for the tenant. And if they do sign it and then they fail to follow through, they would be subject to a $3,000 fine or $3,500 fine from us, I think. And then the tenant would also have a private right of action. So there are ways to hold the landlord accountable for the just cause reason that they state. And then the one other thing that I wanted to say as well, it might be coming up later, is that just cause is now going to apply to lease terms as well. At the state level, they are allowing the landlord to have an initial lease to sort of make up their minds whether they want to renew or not. But once they renew once, then all lease agreements will be subject to just cause. And then the city, at our own level, we are trying to make, our city council members are coming up with legislation to make just cause apply to all lease agreements with no initial review period for the landlord, that it's just cause protections the whole time. So anyway.
That's great. Thank you so much for that information, Dulcie. I appreciate that. That's really exciting news.
All right. Well, wonderful. That is a nice introduction to what we were going to do were some breakout rooms, but I think due to that we're going to change that just a little bit. We're going to have 25 minutes from 4 different orgs, and then another 25 minutes, and then another 25 minutes. And within that time, we will be able to do Q&A. So what I'd like to invite is our first group of organizations, Tenant Protection and Eviction Moratorium Group. And you all know who you are. We will start off with that first group, and let me just make sure that I know who you are. Because this is just a little bit different than what we had planned, but I would love for it to be this way. So those organizations that are in this first group, that would be Q Law, Tenants Union, Dispute Resolution Center of King County, and the Tenant Law Center. So each one of you, each org can do a 10-minute, just let everybody know what you are providing and any information, and then we'll move to the next. So let's go ahead and start with Al from Q Law.
Hi, everyone. Can people see me? Oh, I got spotlighted. I got big. Hello, everyone. I hope your day is going great. Thanks for having me, Taylor. Thanks for having me, Katrina. So nice to be here with everyone. Happy Saturday. A little bit about me. My name's Al Littlejohn. I use they and he pronouns primarily. and I'm a community legal resource manager at Q Law Foundation of Washington. So a little bit about Q Law. Q Law Foundation. There's also a Q Law Association, which is the official part of the bar that's like all the official queers. We're like the nonprofit branch that does free legal service to the queers, just so you know, queers lovingly. So Q Law Foundation of Washington promotes the dignity and respect of LGBTQ Washingtonians within the legal system through advocacy, education, and legal assistance. And we do this through our LGBTQ legal clinic and our Family Matters legal clinic, along with community legal resources. So a little bit about each of those. Our LGBTQ legal clinic is a free legal clinic that happens on the first and third Thursdays of every month. And we take the approach of rather seeing it as like, the meme of the woman seeing all the different equations of a lawyer being like, what is this little thing I can fit together and figure out, barf out the answer, actually approaching it as like a whole person. So like, not only are we trying to figure out what legal question or situation might you have from the situation you're bringing, but what other community resources and like supportive structures could you use to support you while you go through this legal process, or especially support you if you decide that the legal process is not something that you want to go through because it can be very arduous. So that's something totally free to community. Another program that we have as well is our Family Matters Legal Clinic, and this is another free resource that provides full representation to families who are working through adoptions or like second parent adoptions. So that is another resource if folks have interest in that. I will drop in our contact information afterwards so you know who to contact about that. And then a little bit for the community legal resources. So that's where I come in. As a community legal resource manager, I was actually brought onto the team, as well as Jesse, if you're here for the speakers later on, essentially as community organizers. So out of all the people who work at Q Law Foundation, we are the only two, minus another intern, who are not lawyers. And Jesse has much more interest in law than I do. Me and the intern adamantly don't enjoy it. So, this work is very interesting, very fun, but part of the reason of why we were brought on was because of that, because we bring the community aspect to the work. And I know, like, for me, a big reason of why I'm here is to help build connections with LGBTQ communities across the state, because Q Law Foundation is a statewide organization. And we really wanted to focus on, especially with everything that came with the pandemic, now that we can be online, how we can build connections between LGBTQ folks across the state, build relationships with legal service providers across the state, and more specifically, build connections between those legal service providers and the local LGBT community. Because we recognize a lot of folks in the state have to trek to King County to get stuff, and that's not fair. And it's not equitable, and lawyers who are function out of King County cannot tell you the safest shelter for a trans woman in Spokane. So that's where we come in, is to help build that. Another part of the work is also providing trainings to legal service providers. So when they support community members, they treat us like people. That's pretty much how I see it. Just make them a little more culturally competent when it comes to supporting us. And then, of course, making all the legalese, all that great stuff into community resources that community actually feels like they can understand and feel like it's accessible and feel like that they can utilize it. Because we strongly believe that, I know I do, as lawyers who are working for the movement and are trying to strive for community lawyering, it's really about accountability to your client and figuring out what justice looks like for your client, what healing looks like for your client, and providing services to help uplift them, because our community is already inherently powerful. So it's just about giving us the tools to keep doing the things that we're doing. So a little bit about the resources that we have. We have an education page that folks can find, but we have some cute little legal info videos like accessing unemployment benefits while LGBTQ and other webinars we've done with other community partners. We have a one-pager that I have shared with allyship that will be sent out afterwards, but it's also on our website. That is a like contact and a one-pager of all the informations, what to expect when you call, when you send an email, how long it'll take, all that good stuff. We have some guides and some other little packets that address accessing the courts during COVID. So that's around name changes, protection orders, and family law motions. Information on workplace harassment and healthcare discrimination, resources during if you are arrested during COVID-19, know your rights in family court. And a resource that we've most recently put out is like legal know your rights for navigating shelters in Washington State, because as mentioned, we know that the eviction moratorium has a good chance of coming to an end very soon. Inherently, that means there's a high likelihood of LGBTQ folks having to navigate the shelter system. And we also know that the shelter system is inherently not safe for our community. So the guide works through, what does discrimination look like, what you should do to build evidence, what community resources there are in regards to legal advocacy, and well as what other options are, again, outside the legal, route. So if you have any questions, I'll be here. I'm looking forward to talking to more of you after that. Thanks for having me share about Q Law.
Thank you, Al. And we're going to go through all of this first group before we open it up for questions. So the next people that would be up would be our fabulous, I just lost my page. I am so sorry. Fabulous, oh boy. We
You want
are,
to do Tenant Law Center next?
yes, Tenant Law
Perfect.
Center, George, and Dashel.
Thank you. Thank
I'm
you.
probably not saying your name right.
Hi. Okay, so my name is Dashel Milliman Jarvis. Let me just see if I can share our slide. Okay, so here's my screen, and I'll just pull up our slides. So this is just mainly informational. So my name is Dashel Milliman Jarvis. Also in the chat, and he can help answer questions, is George Lung. We are staff attorneys with the Tenant Law Center, which is a small nonprofit law firm that's a program of Catholic Community Services. Largely, the work that we focus on is assisting low-income tenants in the city of Seattle facing housing instability. And usually the stuff that we work with is eviction defense and subsidy terminations. We also do some work with unhoused individuals and families who are referred to us through our parent organization of CCS to try and address barriers to re-entering housing. I'm going to try and just keep it short. The services that largely we provide is direct legal representation. If you have a tenant with questions, even general landlord tenant questions, you can have them call us at 206-324-6890. That is a voicemail intake line. We try and get back to anyone who calls us with a landlord tenant question within a business day or two, with either an appropriate referral. If they happen to fall outside our service area, often we do get calls from other parts of the state outside of King County or the Seattle area. But we try and get back with a appropriate referral we are pretty tied in with other legal aid providers throughout King County and throughout the state. So we try and keep a pretty extensive list of legal resources that might be of help. But obviously, we can also talk with tenants and provide confidential counsel and advice regarding any issues they might be facing with their landlord. And we can evaluate the case to see if it's something that we can provide direct legal representation on. I'm happy to answer any of the questions. I know there were some questions about current aid. I always think that these things are very fact specific. So if there's something where you don't feel where it might be a complicated issue, or you might feel more comfortable speaking confidentially with an attorney, again, I recommend you call our intake line. And with that, I'm just going to go ahead and stop sharing. And you guys, if there's like any questions, I think probably towards the end of everyone else getting introduced, we'll be happy to try and answer what we can. Thanks.
Thank you. So then we will move. Thank you so much for sharing that information. And we will take questions after the next speaker we have from the Dispute Resolution Center of King County, Maryland, Littlejohn.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marilyn, and I am from the King County or Dispute Resolution Center of King County. I want to take the few minutes I have here to talk a little bit about the unique services the Dispute Resolution Service Center offers within the context of the King County Eviction Resolution Program. And this is a program that was started by state courts and to help tenants and landlords avoid eviction proceedings. The Dispute Resolution Center does conflict resolution and mediation. We tend to be mediators, which means we're neutral third parties who are knowledgeable about how to hold civil conversations. We're not advocates per se. We want to work with each party, whether it's the landlord or the tenant, together to come up with a solution that satisfies both parties. That said, I want to, I just wanted to give a summary of where we're at with the eviction moratorium and with the eviction resolution program. As others have said, we've been in an eviction moratorium for a long time. It's scheduled to end June 30th. During this time, evictions are not allowed due to non-payment due to COVID-19, with 3 exceptions. And the exceptions are the tenant's behavior is causing some kind of significant and imminent harm, health, safety risk, property damage to others, or the landlord wants to sell the property and or move into the property itself as a primary residence. In order to do that, those 2 things, sell or move into, they must give the tenant at least 60 days notice. The other thing that the moratorium protects tenants with is during the moratorium, there's no raise in rent, there are no late fees, and whatever you owe cannot go to collection. The eviction moratorium services that are available now are available, but they're voluntary. No one has to use them, neither tenant or landlord. After the moratorium is lifted, then the services become more mandatory, which means that if the tenant wants to participate in the eviction resolution program, the landlord has to participate. So before the moratorium ends, it's voluntary. These services are rent assistance, mediation services, and legal assistance. In terms of the mediation assistance, we work with tenants and landlords to help them develop a reasonable payment plan. And reasonable generally is defined in terms of the tenant's economic situation. And recently, the state legislature passed guidance that says, sort of, or essentially, that the landlord cannot require a tenant to pay more than 1/3 of its monthly rent. So if your monthly rent is $1,500 a month, the landlord cannot require you pay more than $500 a month. Oops. So let me talk about payment plan settlements that we do in conjunction with our mediation services. These settlements can cover not only the payment plan for what's owed, but they also can cover changes in the lease agreement, changes in the monthly rent, some engagement with rental assistance, and other contingencies. All of our agreements have to be very detailed and specific. They say who's going to do what, and the what's very clearly defined, when it needs to be done, and how it's going to be done. So I'm going to show you now an example of a payment plan that a payment plan settlement that we've negotiated. In this case, the landlord has agreed to include the tenant in a rental assistance application she's preparing. But the tenant has to deliver his tax returns to the landlord by a certain date to be included in that application. The landlord and the tenant have agreed that there will be a new lease, a 6-month lease. Up until this point, they're on a month-to-month lease, but they've agreed to a new 6-month lease. And they agreed to a reduction in the rent. Before the new lease takes effect, the rent was $1,500. After the lease takes effect, May 1st, it is going to be $1,300. And this is what they've agreed to in the mediation. With regard to payback for what's owed, the tenant has agreed to make $500 a month, payments of $500 a month on or before the 15th of each month until his rent arrears of almost $1,500 is paid off in full. And the first payment will occur the 15th of May. Now, things change, situations change. So these two individuals, the landlord and the tenant, agreed on a couple of contingencies, or put a couple of contingencies in their payment agreement to adjust the plan should certain things happen. If rental assistance is awarded, they will go back and adjust the payment plan. And if the tenant's income changes, like his hours are reduced, or he gets a better job with more income, they've agreed to come back together and adjust the payment plan. So this is an example of a payment plan agreement. You see that it includes more than just a payment plan. It includes elements around the payment plan. In order to negotiate a payment plan with the DRC, we just encourage people to know their budget very well. The question is your monthly income greater than your expenses? Have you included all your sources of income and expenses? Are you aware or have you anticipated unexpected costs and emergencies? And do you have a clear idea of what's reasonable for you beyond what the law says about no more than 1/3 of your monthly rent? And then contingencies. How are you going to incorporate rent assistance? How are you going to deal with a situation in which your employment changed? Those are the questions people who come into mediation or either with us or negotiation with their landlord, they need to be thinking about these things. So the mediation itself is just a meeting. It's a meeting between individuals in conflict. A mediation is always voluntary, except for the landlord, if the tenant wants to mediate. But in the midst of the mediation, if something happens and one of the parties wants to leave, they can leave. They don't have to stay. The other really good thing about mediation is it's confidential and privileged, except for a couple of exceptions. Confidential means whatever is said or created in that mediation stays with the parties in that mediation. It cannot be discussed with anybody else unless the parties say it's okay for the other party to discuss with somebody else. Privilege means that the mediator or the parties themselves cannot be subpoenaed to go to court to testify about the specifics of what was said in the mediation. But there are exceptions. As a mediator, we have to tell the court, if asked, whether a mediation has occurred, whether a dispute was settled. If an agreement comes to pass, then that agreement is subject for court review. We have to report who participated in the mediation and the number of times we tried to reach the tenants. The last thing I'll say is, again, mediators are not advocates for either side. We're neutral parties. Our goal is to help the parties have a civil conversation so that they can both get their needs met. There are 4 forms of mediation. One is face-to-face, where the mediator facilitates the conversation. And if it leads to an agreement, that agreement becomes a contract. You can have a face-to-face conversation where the mediator is facilitating that conversation, but not end up in an agreement. It's a more preliminary conversation and no contract is made. Sometimes the parties just don't want to talk to each other. So what happens here is that the mediator goes between the parties separately and takes each party's offers and counter offers to the other party. So there's this back and forth over time. And believe it or not, you can reach an agreement that way and develop a contract. And then lastly, the parties may not want a mediator. They just may want to negotiate the thing themselves. However, if one or the other party wants some coaching, they can come to the Dispute Resolution Center and mediator can coach them on, to think about what they want to offer, the implications of what they offer, what the other party might offer, and how they might respond. So it's a coaching session. Now, I could go on, but I think I've gone on long enough. I'm going to leave you with contact information for the Dispute Resolution Center. We do weekly info sessions. I think it's Tuesday afternoon. If you email housing@kcdrc.org, you can get additional information and get a link to that info meeting. And we work closely with the Housing Justice Project around legal services. And we also have some capacity to help people get rent assistance. And this includes my contact information. And each of you should get this PowerPoint after the presentation, after the event today.
Yes. Once again, we thank you so much, Marilyn. That's a lot of information, and we will be giving everybody everybody's contact information around this in all of our speakers. So I'm sure there are some questions. And I'm looking to Kelsey. Is there any questions that we need to highlight?
Yeah, some questions came up previously that I think that we can readdress, and then during the presentations as well. One is, can landlords say no to payment plans?
Can the landlord say no to a payment plan?
Yeah.
During the moratorium, yes. The landlord can say no. During the moratorium, neither party needs to get involved in doing a payment plan or talking to each other. However, that's not wise. They need to talk to each other. But the landlord can say no. In fact, I had a tenant who had like let's say a $20,000 back arrears. He offered $15,000 up front with the hope that the landlord would dismiss the rest, and the landlord said no. So a landlord can say no during the moratorium. If they can't come to an agreement after the moratorium and the landlord proceeds to eviction, then the court has to decide whether or not the payment plan offered by the tenant was reasonable. And that's based on the tenant's economic circumstances.
Just as an add, if you don't mind,
No, go ahead.
there's also recently passed Senate Bill 5160, which does it again. I don't think I agree with Marilyn. It doesn't require the landlord to accept a payment plan or any sort of settlement arrangements, like, you know, I will pay half of it up front, and if you forgive the other half. It does require a landlord to offer some repayment plan in order to proceed with an eviction. So that's part of the current moratorium too, that's you know, before at least under the governor's moratorium, that before the debt can be considered an enforceable debt, or any back rent owed can be considered an enforceable debt, and thus something that could be used to start an unlawful detainer. A reasonable repayment plan has to be offered. That has been codified by a recent legislative action across the state.
And
so
that is
yeah.
correct. However, if the tenant doesn't accept it, or if the tenant offers something and the landlord doesn't accept it, the landlord, as long as there was an effort to make it to come together with, quote, a reasonable plan, the landlord doesn't have to accept it and can go toward eviction. But filing that eviction claim doesn't mean that the tenant will be evicted. The court can side with the tenant. But you don't want, as a tenant, you don't want even an eviction filing on your record.
And so another question ended up being, which I'm hearing a similarity, and Dulcie did state this, tenants have the right to counsel, but do you need a representation, a lawyer for an eviction court? And Dulcie did state that yes, representation, and you're entitled to it. And I just want to make sure that, okay, so
That
I'm
is true.
hearing a lot of nodding heads.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll add that whenever we do an agreement, a settlement agreement, we always recommend to both parties that they have a legal representative look at it before they sign.
Good.
Another question was around, you mentioned that you didn't want an eviction on your record, and another question was around that. Does an eviction during COVID impact your credit report, and will it show up on your record?
So just conceptually, I want to sort of separate what most people mean with, an eviction record versus credit. A credit report is a type of consumer report which generally says how much you might owe to other parties or how much money you can borrow. It's sort of like a general statement of your credit worthiness. A debt that might be related to an eviction, or even one that might just be related to a bad move out, bad tenancy, can normally go to a debt collector, and the debt collector will report the amount owing to credit bureaus, and that will show up on your credit and affect your ability potentially to rent. Yeah, the actual record of the eviction is a separate issue. That's what Marilyn was talking about, when an eviction case is filed, that can show up on a tenant screening report, which also goes into filed court records and can be a separate barrier. Now, at least within the city of Seattle, there's a special provision that was passed that states that an eviction that occurs for any reason other than being a danger to the health and safety of others during the course of the moratorium, and I believe up to 6 months afterwards, would be cause for obtaining what's called an order of limited dissemination, which is a type of court order you can use to remove that eviction off a tenant screening report. As far as the amount of money owing to a former landlord, that is a separate barrier. And that's one of the reasons why there is so much of a push towards these repayment plans and rental assistance to try and mitigate that as much as possible for tenants going forward.
Thank you for that information. I know there's more questions, and I want to make sure that we get all of our amazing orgs to present. So I'm going to move us forward to the community organizations and resources. And if we have time at the very end of all three sections, we will answer the last few questions if there's time available. So thank you to the entire group for the tenant protection and eviction moratorium information. And we will move towards Gay City. Melvin, are you available? I don't think Melvin's here right now. Then Charlotte from Solid Ground.
Hello. Let me share my presentation.
All right.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte Miner, and I work for Solid Ground as a regional access point and diversion specialist. My manager, Celestine Berry-Smith, is also here today to answer questions. She's the supportive services manager at Solid Ground. And I'm here today to talk about the Regional Access Point, also known as the RAP. So I'll get started. So I want to start off by describing the Regional Access Point. So RAPs are regionally centralized hubs where homeless households can access connections to services and begin conversations about how to find creative ways to solve current housing situations. There are currently 5 RAPs in King County. There's the Catholic Community Services, which has 2 branches, one in Seattle and one on the east side, the YWCA, Multi-Service Center, and Solid Ground. So there are 2 aspects to CEA regional access points. First, there's the diversion program, which is where RAP staff assists eligible clients with finding possible housing options. Once a client is approved for move-in, the RAP staff supports the client with move-in costs, relocation fees, and connection to other community services and resources. The diversion program has been proven to be a viable option to make more stable housing. The diversion program allows clients to find affordable housing based upon their income and utilizing family or friends within the city or in other areas outside of King County. The second aspect to coordinated entry for all is the triage tool, also known as the CEA assessment or coordinated entry for all assessment. The CEA housing assessments are conducted for households that request the service in hopes of a place on the priority pool and a housing referral from CEA. The assessment takes about 45 minutes to complete and is currently being done by phone due to COVID. It's important to note that housing through CEA is very limited and not a path to housing for most households experiencing homelessness. To get in contact with the Solid Ground RAP, you can call this number and it will lead to a voicemail where you can leave your information and the first available staff will return your call. And I've sent this information out to Taylor so they'll be able to get this information to everyone who's present today. I also included the information for the other RAP locations in case one of those better suit your location. And yeah, that is kind of all I have to share today. And I want to open it up for questions if anyone wants further information.
Thank you. We're gonna wait for questions at the end of the whole group. Just it's a little bit different than usual.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Charlotte.
Charlotte, can you unshare your screen?
Oh yeah. How do I do that?
There should be a little button at the top where it says stop
Or
sharing.
the bottom.
Oh, got it. Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for that information. And we will now connect with Melvin from Gay City. Melvin, unmute. There you are. We can't really hear you, Melvin. There.
All right, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, great. All right, yes, I'm Melvin. I'm with Gay City, Seattle's LGBTQ Center, and our whole our mission is really just to create access and connections to resources, wellness, and community. We feature over a dozen programs, you know, from our wellness center, which provides free HIV and STI testing, as well as some other health services. But we also have a resource center, which can really help community out. So if you're looking for assistance in and getting connected with various organizations that can assist with housing efforts. We can, our resource program is great at helping with that. We're also great at, just helping provide advocacy for our community. So helping you to find the resources that you seek. And the thing is that we identify that even as you're navigating any situation, we understand that there are various components to that. There are various barriers that you could be facing. So if you are dealing with, if you're dealing with a potential situation with your landlord, if you are at the same time having concerns around how, in the meantime, how am I accessing basic needs? How am I able to access food sources? What are some accessible shelters? A lot of those lines. That's where Gay City can come in to assist and help out as well. So our resource program has been going for about 20 years. Right now, we have a resource database that's available online with various resources. If you just visit gaycity.org/resource database, that's gaycity.org/resource database. It's a great resource with quite a few different resources that are there. And we also have advocates that are available Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And in some cases, we actually have access to our staff from about 11:30 to 7:30 p.m. During the week. So definitely feel free to visit our website to learn a little bit more around those access times. Yeah, so that's a little bit about us.
Thanks, Melvin.
Hey, Al.
And then we will open up for questions after we hear from United Church Emergency Fund from Joe.
Thank you very much, Taylor. Thank you, Katrina, for this invitation. I am so honored to be here and to share with folks. And really happy to see Marilyn Littlejohn, who I haven't seen for about 25 years. So big shout out to her. Hi, Marilyn. I've been the executive director of United Churches Emergency Fund, also known as University Churches Emergency Fund, for 17 and a half years. I want to tell you just a little bit about who we are, and then a little bit about why it's so important for me to be here today. In 1986, Seattle was experiencing a bit of a economic downturn, and a lot of middle management folks were getting laid off of places like Boeing. And so folks were visiting the churches in the university district, knocking on doors, asking for help to pay their rent. And the churches by themselves didn't have the money, the time, or the expertise to handle all the volumes of people walking through the door. So they pooled their resources together and started USEF. So that means from the beginning in 1986, we have been here to try to help prevent homelessness. And the way we do that has certainly changed through the years. But where we are right now is that we serve 4 zip codes in North Seattle, 98103, 98105, 98115, and 98125. And we help with a small amount of money, $250 towards rent, utilities, or move-in costs. The good news is that almost always the money that we send out is matched by 2 to 3 other agencies. Because of COVID, we've had to move the office to my home. So right now, you're just going to get me, unless you're Spanish speaking, and then you'll get one of my volunteers, but you'll just get me. And the process is very, very easy. you're going to need to send me a copy of your ID and the first page of your lease that shows you signed a lease for 6 months to a year. And then I contact your manager, pledge the $250 and send it to them. We can provide this kind of assistance once in a 12-month period and 3 times in a lifetime. You know, the reason why I'm really here is because of folks like one of my clients who called on Thursday, a trans man who told me that he almost did not call. He was so afraid to reach out because we have the word church in our name. And I'll tell you, he's not the first person that said that to me. And as an ordained community minister, as a person who identifies as something other than straight, who's in a committed relationship with a woman, that kind of thing makes me want to weep. I want you guys to know, if there's anybody out there that needs help, we are safe. Please contact us for help for rent, utility, or move-in costs. And I'm also here to ask for your help, because we need folks from the community to be on our board so we can continue to embrace inclusivity and we can try to visualize together a more healing and healthy way to be in relationship. That's really all I have to say today. It's a very simple process. I'm the one-person office at the moment, so please give me a call if you need me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joe. That warms my heart. So on that note, does anybody have questions? Kelsey, can you read any questions for us?
Wrong button. There weren't too many questions that entered through the chat through the last 3 speakers, but one that I think is really important to address, and Al mentioned in the chat, was our RAP that Charlotte mentioned, welcoming and affirming to trans folks.
Hi, I am Celestine Berry Smith. I'm the Supportive Services Manager at Solid Ground. And thank you all for having us here today. And thank you to Charlotte. She did a great job. She may have something to add to this. We serve people who are homeless, living in their cars, or in a place not meant for human habitation. That means everybody. And we gladly support anyone who comes in that needs our support with move-in services. And so, yes, we absolutely serve trans community, all others, BIPOC community, and all others.
Thank you. Yes, and I used to work with Celeste in another area, so it's nice to see you again. And yes, I used to work at the share house, and they brought in everybody, and I am great. I'm so glad to have Solid Ground here. So thank you. Any other questions? Was there another one?
I think Al was asking, oh, sorry, Kelsey, to jump in. But I know Al was asking, I think just generally for all of these resources, the how welcoming and affirming they are for queer and trans folks. I think this specifically asked around trans folks. So if anyone else wants to share, obviously, you know, a place like Gay City has gay in the name. But, you know, we obviously, and we heard from Joe about the United Churches Emergency Fund is clearly a designated, you know, space wanting to welcome queer and trans community members. But yeah, if anyone else who hasn't mentioned specifically around that support, we'd love to hear that as well.
I did see that Al had asked specifically about CCS, which is the parent organization of Tenant Law Center. Catholic Community Services in general does serve people of all faiths and all walks of life. Again, like as Celestine said, we're here to help homeless people, and Tenant Law Center in particular. We don't discriminate. We serve people who need it. Our only criteria is that you're a low income renter facing housing instability. That is the only guideline that we have in order to say that you fit into our contracts, and we can help you as your attorneys. So we have served people from the trans community, gender nonconforming, people from all walks of life. And so I think we try to be inclusive with our clients, and it's certainly not anything where it's a box that we check that says that means we can't serve you. So
Thank you.
I will just add that Dispute Resolution Center is open to everyone without regard to any qualification, whether it's gender or religion or immigration status. We serve everyone.
Fantastic.
And yeah, at Gay City, we definitely we support everyone. We actually have a training and technical assistance program where we actually host trainings and work with different organizations to help them as they uplift and begin to understand a little bit more around what it means to be LGBTQ affirming. So we do provide those services, but all of our services in the agency are definitely open to everyone. And we identify also that majority of our clients are queer and trans, LGBTQ folks, and so we even offer a youth program, and that is led by queer and trans youth. And some of those youth actually are, some of the youth that come through our youth program have really been advocates helping other youth get access to various housing resources and other sources. So yeah, that's just a little bit about us.
Thank you. So I'm going to move us to our last group of amazing organizations. This is the City of Seattle Resources and Information. And I also am being mindful of time. We are doing good on time, but just kind of put that out there. So I would like to invite Dulcie to speak around the City of Seattle's, oh my goodness. Dulcie, take it away. You know me better than that.
Around the city's rental regulations and fair housing laws. Hi, everybody. My name is Dulcie O'Sullivan, and I work for the Department of Construction and Inspections, which you wouldn't think had anything to do with maybe renters' rights or protections, but that's where those folks are housed as part of code compliance. And so I have a small little presentation, and I'll just go through that and then answer any questions. I always get a lot of questions at these things because I'm representing the city. And unlike many other municipalities in the county and the state, not only do we have a robust rental regulation and protections, we also have a dedicated staff to enforce those regulations. And that's really the difference sometimes between people being able to stay in their homes and not stay in their homes. So anyway, my main objective here today is just to make sure that everyone here knows that we exist and that there is help available. So I am really bad at technology, but I am hoping that I managed to do this correctly. Okay, so let me see. The button's in the way. Sorry, just bear with me. The name of the program that I lead is Renting in Seattle. And that sort of represents the website, www.seattle.gov/renting in Seattle, where we lay out all of the, how do I do this? All of the main rights and obligations of, I'm sorry, having a little bit of trouble here, where we lay out all the rights and obligations of tenants and landlords. Okay, now I think I'm good. Okay, so this little presentation is usually, well, it represents both my department, the Department of Construction and Inspections in the Renting in Seattle program, but also the Office for Civil Rights. They are all the other main regulatory department with regard to housing protections. The difference is their protections are based on protected classes, and the rental regulations that our department enforces are just based on ordinances and housing standards. So yeah, the tenant protections that we have in Seattle are basically to do with housing standards. We're making sure that there is a minimum standard for rental housing that every rental unit has to meet. Fair housing laws, which are based on your protected class, and we're all members of several protected classes, and there are quite a few in Seattle. And then rental regulations, which are mainly to do with the relationship between the landlord and the tenant, and the tenancy itself, and how it is, what regulations are around that. Okay. So since 2014, all rental units are required to be registered with the city. Prior to that, we didn't know how many rental units we had, which is pretty crazy considering what a booming city we are and how our growth has been exponential. About 52% of Seattle are renters. So that makes up a significant portion of our population. So the units that are registered have to meet minimum standards. I've made a list right there, but it's sort of common sense. They have to be a minimum size. They have to have functional windows. There has to be ventilation. The plumbing fixtures all have to be functional and working and to code. Structurally, it has to be safe. And the mechanical, all the heating, electrical systems have to be to code and meet minimum standards. And there has to be fire and safety elements like guardrails, exits, egress, steps that have proper risers, all of those things that make a place safe to live. And then security, where, for example, every rental has to have an observation port in the main entry so that the tenant can see who's at their front door when they look out. And these units are subject to rental inspection every 5 to 10 years. So every 5 to 10 years, the units come up for inspection, and the city goes out and makes sure that they're meeting the minimum standards. And the minimum standards are contained in a checklist. It's the rental regulation inspection ordinance checklist, or RIO, as we call it for short, and you can access it at that link there at the bottom of the page, just to see if your unit is meeting those standards. Because another good thing to know is that if you are subject to a rent increase and there are things in your rental unit that do not meet the checklist standards, then the landlord has to amend the condition before the rent increase can be effective. So you have to notify the landlord, hey, you're giving me an increase, but this is not up to code per the checklist. And then they would have to amend it, and you could contact the city, and the city would basically say you cannot increase the rent until such time as this has been remediated, and they will do the inspection too. So it's a good thing to know. So fair housing, as I said, mainly we should think of it as something that offers you protections based on your membership of a protected class. And everybody is a member of a protected class. Most of us are members of several. But basically, fair housing says that everyone has an equal right to access housing and housing services. And the protected classes we have in Seattle are race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, familial status, marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity, veteran or military status, age, ancestry. If you have a housing choice voucher, commonly known as a Section 8 voucher, political ideology, your creed, if you have an alternative source of income or other subsidies. So you cannot be denied housing because you have a voucher or you have even a temporary subsidy from Catholic Community Services or wherever. That cannot be a reason for somebody to deny you housing. So those are all protected classes. And fair housing laws apply basically to every aspect of housing, all types of housing, and any staff or personnel that works around that housing or housing services. That includes owners, managers, mortgage lenders, homeowner associations, the folks that work on site, like the plumbers, the cleaners, electricians, the marketing, media, maintenance staff, and of course, other residents. So right now, this is just a quick summary of eviction protections in Seattle. Just cause eviction ordinance, which we've had in Seattle since the 80s, has recently come to be in a few other cities, my own, Burien included, and has now been adopted at the state level, which is great for people who live outside of Seattle or don't live in one of those other cities that have adopted it. It's currently only enforced with month-to-month tenancies, but legislation has passed now to make it apply to all rental agreements, and that's at the state level. And their law is basically saying that the landlord would have an initial period on the first lease to sort of make their mind up whether they wanted to renew it or not. But Seattle is proposing a bill that says that every rental agreement, whether it's the first one or not, would be subject to just cause protections. Something to remember, and that's really important, is that there have been so many, there's been so much new legislation and so many new technical requirements for notices, both at the city level and now the state level. So much so that basically any 14-day notice or any notice that's of any substance to do with your tenancy must have all of this required language on it in order to be proper notice. And it's going to take a while, I think, for landlords to come up to speed with all of these requirements. So it's definitely worthwhile, if you get a notice, to call the Renting in Seattle helpline at 684-5700. Because we'll review those notices. And if they are technically deficient, we will require them to be rescinded. So if you got a 14-day notice to pay rent and you call us on the 12th day and say, hey, can you review this notice and see if it's, if it's legit, if it's proper, and we find a technical difficulty with it, we would require the owner to rescind it and reissue a new one, which could buy you an additional 14 days. So it's definitely worthwhile just to know that you're getting a proper notice to contact us and ask us to review it. The The state protections for eviction proceedings, which sort of went through a sweeping enhancement in 2019, now provide much more opportunity to save a tenancy, even if you have been filed against and you are subject to a lawsuit for eviction. The judge has much more discretion now to, to try and sustain somebody's housing if it's sustainable. So if somebody's behind, but looks like they have the means to catch up and come good on their rent, the judge can actually take that into consideration, where before that was not the case. And now, as part of our post-moratorium eviction protections in Seattle, delinquent rent as a result of the COVID-19 emergency is a defense to eviction. And that's an important technical point for folks. And then, of course, as I pointed out, we have a dedicated compliance staff to answer questions, to clarify what the city ordinances and regulations require, and to explain your rights and protections if you need to know any of that information. So some of the new things, it seems like every other week there's new legislation, so we're having a difficult time keeping up. And we are subject matter experts that have worked with these ordinances for many years, but there's so much at the state level and coming through the city as well, that it's hard to sort of get a grasp on all of it. And so we're trying to do that. There's going to be some need to harmonize, for example, Seattle's long existing just cause ordinance with the state's now new just cause ordinance. But we do have a new renter's handbook. That's the front cover on the right-hand side. And it's a far superior summary of tenants' rights and obligations and sort of practical tips on renting, utility bills. All of that is in this new renter's handbook, and it's published in 13 different languages. It's available on our website, www.seattle.gov/renting in Seattle. We have printed handbooks, and they will be available at cost, and landlords will have to buy them and then distribute them to the tenants. But right now we don't have a safe way to distribute them. So people are having to just use the printer-friendly PDF we have on our website. But this book is really a departure from what we had before, which was just a bunch of typed double column pages of information that wasn't all too relevant really for every day-to-day renting. And this book is like our website. It basically takes you through the rental cycle from looking for housing to giving notice to move out, talks about the eviction process, etc. And this will be subject to updating too. We'll have a new issue every January, unless, of course, something new doesn't get passed, but it looks like that's the trend for the next couple of years. So that's basically, in general, what our services are there for you for. We take complaints about substandard housing or landlords behaving in ways that are not legal or acceptable. We're the people that you contact. Now I'm just going to go through the post-moratorium protections that we have in place. Also, the state has now just introduced a bunch of post-moratorium protections, and those will also potentially have to be harmonized with ours, or ours will have to be harmonized with them. But Council Bill 119784 is the bill that basically made non-payment of rent as an official defense to eviction for 6 months following the expiration of the mayor's moratorium. And we've been told that June 30th is definitely the end of the state moratorium, but we are not clear on whether that will be the end of the city moratorium. It may be extended. It's really, we just don't know at this point. So the tenant has to self-certify that their financial hardship and inability to pay the rent is due to COVID-19 circumstances. And then all the 14-day notices that are issued must include this language. And there's also now a new requirement to include the right to counsel language. That's the city's requirement. So that's going to have to be on there too. I just didn't include it on this because it's so new. But if this is not on the 14-day notice in Seattle, then it would be considered deficient. If you cannot pay rent during or within 6 months after the end of the mayor's moratorium, your inability to pay is a defense to eviction that you may raise in court. Failure to include this language is also a defense to eviction, and a deficient notice is also subject to rescission if the tenant brings it to our attention. Also, there are no attorney's fees awardable, and that can be very expensive if the tenant ends up having to pay them. So I think we went through payment plans. I think other folks here went through payment plans. The state payment plan is actually, I would think, better conceived than this one that was conceived last year. It talks about getting a payment plan that actually is realistic considering the tenant's circumstances. And it also limits, I think Joe was saying, it also limits the amount of a tenant's total income that can be given over to pay the late rent. So then this language also has to be on the on the notice. And this is about the payment plan. So it says if you're overdue in your rent installments and your landlord does not accept payment, you may raise that as a defense to eviction in court. And failure to include that language is also a defense to eviction. This was the bill that was passed and is going to be enforced by the Office for Civil Rights. And it's basically that landlords can't take adverse actions against a tenant or a potential tenant based on any eviction-related records, which started at the beginning of the civil emergency in March of 2020, and for up to 6 months after the civil emergency is over. The only exception, as I wrote in the chat box earlier in Seattle, is if somebody is presenting an imminent threat to health and safety. Whereas in the state, there are 2 additional reasons you can start eviction proceedings under the current moratorium. So landlords must include the following information on all applications for rental properties. So this has to be on any new applications. Landlords are prohibited from taking adverse action and blah, 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 proclaimed by Mayor Durkan on March 3rd, 2020. So that has to be on any applications that you make to explain that if you have had an eviction during COVID, that cannot be used against you. And there's a rebuttable presumption created if a landlord does view a COVID-19 related eviction and then takes adverse action against the tenant. So that's where I would take questions now, but I don't know if we're waiting for the next speakers to finish. I hope I didn't take too much time. It's difficult sometimes to try and share as much information as there is to share. And I didn't even cover a lot of the newer stuff. But the main thing is, at this point, we're here always for all kinds of reasons, but our post-moratorium protections are in place and the right to counsel is in place. And those are 2 very important things, because once the moratorium is over, we do expect to see a lot of evictions coming, and we'll need to be ready for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dulcie. Can you unshare your screen? And thank you for that information. And I know you usually give a lot more information. So please definitely go to use the friendly guide that Dulcie showed, and we will be including that in our resources because it really is helpful. I've looked at it more than a dozen times. It answers a lot of questions. So we are going to wait for questions till the rest of the group goes, and we are going to, we were able to we have a little bit more time. So Seattle Public Utilities. I know I'm not going to say your name right, so please say Socorro.
Socorro. Hi,
Socorro.
Taylor. Thank you. Yeah, my
Thank
name is
you.
Socorro Medina. And how much time do I have? Just to make sure that the last speaker has time to go.
Yeah, we'll make sure that there's time, but about 5 minutes, if that's.
Yeah, I can make it work. Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. So let's see. Okay, can you see my screen okay?
We can.
Great. Okay. So Seattle Public Utilities is the city department that provides water, drainage and wastewater, and garbage, recycling, compost. So I'm here representing some of my co-workers that couldn't be here. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about each of the resources and the kind of main messages that they want me to pass on. And before getting into that, I just wanted to say that, for most renters, you would have your own City Light account in Seattle, but for Seattle Public Utility is different. Normally, the bills are in the property owner's name. So as a renter, the costs are passed on in different ways. It could be a third-party billing. It could be included in the rent, and that's not determined by Seattle Public Utility. So I wanted to give you information about the program that I do manage. I work with apartments in Seattle to make sure that the recycled garbage and compost, it has clear labels, and we provide some resources. We visit buildings and work with property managers, maintenance staff to make sure that they have enough containers, that they have really large signage. And we also provide different resources for residents. So like this little food scrap containers. So if you're interested in any of these resources, you can contact us here. You can see the phone number, website, and then my information is at the end too. And then for water, so the main message for water is to keep an eye on your toilet. The toilet is really the top, it could be the top water waster in your home. So, check for leaks, and here there's information about how to do that. And these slides I already provided to Taylor and Katrina, so they can share with you. And then when it comes to wastewater, so the main message is to please make sure that you don't flush anything except toilet paper and human waste to prevent sewer issues and problems and backups and all sorts of complications. And then also to keep oil and grease out of your kitchen sink, because this can also block the pipes and cause problems. And then when it comes to drainage, so this is the system of storm drains. You can see a picture here that are all over the city. So you want to make sure that people know that all those storm drains, they don't go to a treatment plant. They go directly to Puget Sound or to Lake Union, to all our water bodies. So it's really important that we don't put anything in those storm drains. They're just for rainwater to get through. And this is not a program that SPU manages directly, but I just wanted to highlight it here because it's a utility discount program that provides a lot of discounts on both Seattle City Light and SPU bills. And we know that there's a lot of residents that would be eligible, but they haven't signed up for it. So here's the information of how to find out more about eligibility and if you want to participate. And then this is my email address, and then my coworkers, in case you want to reach out and you have any questions about anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. So the next person, Anna from DSHS.
Yes, hi, thank you. So mine should be quick one. So thank you, Taylor and Katrina, for the invite. My name is Ann Ong. I'm with DSHS. I'm the regional consultant with the Washington Connection Community Partnership Program. And good to see you, Marilyn, again. I worked with Marilyn a few years back. Good to see you. So let me see if I can share my screen. I just want to see. Okay. Can anyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. All right, great. So for some of you might know what Washington Connection is. It's washingtonconnection.org. And this website offers a fast and easy way for anyone to apply for a variety of services with DSHS, such as basic food, cash, long-term care, child care assistance, and some selected Medicaid programs for 65 years and plus. We also have added recently the important messages on top of the page, post any of the updates that we have with changes. So for example, we have the disaster cash assistance program that we will reinstate it. So anyone that are affected by the disaster, with COVID, the pandemic, and they need assistance, they can submit an application, apply for the DCAP benefits. All right, so this website really provides great resources under the Find Services tab. This provides contact information, links to many resources, such as one of the new one that we just add on is the Eviction Rent Assistance Program link under the Find Services. And if you go to Housing and Utility Resources, and it's under that category. So under the Find Services tab, there's total of 16 different categories under there. Lots of resources and links that you can browse around and get resources that you may need. The middle tab is the Apply Now feature. It's, once you know that which benefit you want to apply, you can click on that to complete an online application. It may take you 15 to half an hour to complete the application, depending on the household. It may take longer if you have larger families. And once you completed the application online, you can contact our statewide contact center number listed there, 877-501-2233 for an interview. And it could be the same day. Just make sure it's between 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday for an interview. And you don't have to wait for an appointment. You don't have to wait for the letter that we're going to be sending you. You can just literally submit an application and maybe wait a minute or two later. If it's before 3 o'clock, just pick up the phone, call that number for an interview. As far as the tab next to it, see if I qualify, is a pre-screen feature. If you're not sure which program you may be eligible for, you could use that. It may take 15 minutes or so to use that feature to find out what other program you may be eligible for besides DSHS. You would have an option to transfer the information over to the online application if it's a DSHS program. If it's a non-DSHS program, it will give you links and information on those programs. Then you can, find out more information to decide if you need to apply. And I believe City of Seattle programs are listed on that feature as well, regarding the utilities programs. Other helpful links below next to the family pictures, information such as DSHS frequently used forms if you need that, to how to set up an account if you like to, if clients on a system with DSHS and would like to access a little bit more information regarding their case, then they want to set up an account to be able to access those information. And it's listed on under How Do I tab. As well as other online tutorials throughout different pages, and you can view and watch those tutorials to learn how to navigate as well as set up accounts and much other resources that you see from the website. And then if any agencies who are interested and want to learn more about the website or about the partnership program, please visit the Community Partner Resources tab below. Next to the family picture, and then or contact me for detail. There are also other printable materials available under that tab for you to go to access as well. So browse around and when you do get a chance, and see if you have any other questions later on. But that's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And we have one more speaker. We're really getting out of time for, but we have a break shortly after this. So one more speaker, some questions, and then we will take a quick break. So our last speaker I am lost. Here we are. Last speaker, yes. Office of Housing and Weatherization. There you
Hi,
are.
folks. My name is Soka Don from the City of Seattle's Office of Housing. I will be talking today about our homeownership stabilization programs, and we'll share my screen. It's good to be here, and I'm excited to go back in the sun after this as well. Let me go ahead and do this. Oops, open system preferences. Hold up. I think I gotta, sorry. Okay, do you guys hopefully see my screen?
No.
Share. No?
There you are.
Awesome. It's full screen. Okay, so I am here today to talk about is this full screen for folks? Probably not. Okay, I'm here today to talk about the Office of Housing's programs to help really keep homeowners in their homes. Again, my name is Soka, and I will be going pretty quickly through these programs: our home repair program, our weatherization program, our oil to electric program, and our foreclosure program. My role is the community engagement specialist. My job is to really help folks get knowledgeable about programs and as a whole, make sure that our programs are accessible to community members. A bit of background about myself. I lived in the Chinatown ID. I grew up in White Center. So I think, super familiar, at least a bit about some resources out in the community. The first thing I'll talk about is the home repair loan program. Basically, this is a program to help with major home repairs. Anything that has to do with critical structure of the home that impacts health and safety. As you can see below here, we have a couple of things that we typically work on: roof, side sewer, siding, wiring, flooring, and even painting. That picture is not a stock photo. That's actually Aziz. Aziz is retired. He no longer works for Office of Housing. Happy retirement, Aziz. But that's him with a homeowner that he recently, or helped, I guess, years ago. I want to share with you basically the income threshold limits. These are effective since January 2021. If you focus on the homeowner side, the income limit basically is if you're a household size of 1 and your annual income is less than or 61,800, then you would be eligible for programs. One thing that I did not say was that the home repair program is also open for renters. There's a bit of a stipulations around that, including signing a 3-year covenant that I can talk more about if you want to reach out to me, or I can answer later as well. We do have a home repair grant program. These are for folks, community members that don't qualify for a home repair program. This is a grant, totally, you don't got to pay it back. It's up to $10,000. We came up with this program quite recently, maybe just a couple years ago, to help out homeowners who aren't qualified for our home repair loan program. And there are, a couple of reasons they want to be qualified for is that, for instance, they don't make enough money to make repayments. They have a reverse mortgage. In these cases, they would just qualify for a grant program. We definitely understand like this is a limited amount of money, but it would be enough to do, for instance, a roof repair. One big thing that I forgot to mention was our home repair loan program. It is up to $40,000. So that's the max amount for a home repair program, typically. Then let me go ahead. Next, winterization program. It's a really funny word. I didn't notice this word until basically I started working for the Office of Housing. But winterization is really much the science of keeping your home warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. It deals with insulation, air sealings, heating systems, energy efficiency as a whole. The income limits are the same for this program as our home repair program. Winterization is a great tool to really, I think, relate it to the energy savings or cost savings world. It's a really good way to keep your utility bills at the lowest possible, so you can have more spending money to move that around. With the Foreclosure Prevention program, we work with the Washington Homeownership Resource Center. Their numbers right there. What's relevant right now is that I think a lot of folks are struggling with rent. I think homeowners are facing this foreclosure aspect potentially. We would encourage folks to reach out to the Washington Homeownership Resource Center. Again, their number is listed there. They'll connect you with someone who can counselor that can help you work with lenders, get current on payments, and also offering English language resources and tools. This, I did this pretty fast in a nutshell, really. But my contact information there, my number, as well as my email. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. And I think actually, I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but I think I'm going to share quickly this oil to electric program. Actually, this oil to electric program is a new program. If you're in the oil heated home, what we do is we convert your oil heated home into electric heated system, and this does wonders for the environment. That's also the cost for you to stay in a home that is energy efficient. So this is a new pilot program. We worked on this program in the Devalmisha Valley, so South Park and Georgetown neighborhood. And now this program is citywide. It is limited funding for the program. We're moving it, I think, quite cautiously in getting folks geared up for the program, but also making sure that we have a effective wait list for folks that want to be enrolled in the program in the future. I think that's it. I keep saying I think that's it, but I think the last thing I'll share for real this time is that telling you about these programs is one thing, but definitely just reach out to me. I can work with you one-on-one. If you have any questions from this presentation or just questions in general about the resources that we have, these are really our top of the line, first line kind of programs that we hope to have really help homeowners stay in their home in the city of Seattle. Thank you very much. And yeah, I think I'll stop from there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that is a focus on homeowners, but one of the reasons why we ask for them to show up is because we have talked about informing if you have a landlord that owns it, you're renting from a landlord that owns the home, then, and there's some things that need to be done, and they are on a low income too, this is a great resource to be able to know that it's available. Because as a renter, I did not know this. And I lived in some places that needed some support, and the landlord just told me, I don't have money. So this is a nice way of knowing that there's some things that may be able to help your landlord if they are own the house and you're renting the house. I want to open it up to one more person. Is we were not able to have speak earlier, and that is Helena from the Tenants Union. And then we will open up for question and then take a break.
Hi, thank you everyone. My name is Helena. I'm with the Tenants Union of Washington. Apologize, I'm having some trouble with my internet, so I'm not on camera, and I know we're a little behind time, but I just wanted to share really briefly about some of the things that we're able to do. Huge shout out to all of the other presenters, and oftentimes if folks call us or make contact with us, we'll end up, referring or suggesting people follow up with a lot of these awesome groups. But if you ever need someone to kind of one-on-one go through your housing situation, your rental housing situation, and try to make kind of a plan of action, that's what our counselors try to do. I will post in the chat with the link to our hotline and hotline hours. I do want to acknowledge that with COVID and having to move everything virtual, we have a huge capacity problem in answering all of the hotline calls. And I will put I'm one of our counselors in Seattle. I'll put my personal number and email in the chat as well if folks want to save that and share it out. I apologize that we're still trying to figure out how to be there and reach everyone who's calling looking for assistance or guidance. In addition to the kind of education and referral program that we have, we also work to help renters who are organizing, maybe within your building or neighborhood, if there's a particular landlord who needs more pressure. Obviously collective action is sometimes the only way to get that to happen. And we are happy to kind of meet folks where they're at and try to help recruit your neighbors, think through a strategy, do that kind of work. We also have a couple statewide campaigns going on right now, trying to pressure to extend the governor's eviction moratorium, because even with some of the legislation that Dulcie shared, it will be obviously huge chaos on the 30th. I think none of the organizations are really amped and staffed up and ready to work with these new laws. And so we're really pushing the governor to hold off on that and extend the statewide moratorium to make sure folks can stay safe and housed. And then we have some higher reach goals as well around canceling rental debt, some kind of emergency rent control so that folks can't just be priced out. And I'm sharing that campaign page. Would love folks to sign up for updates and to help us with that work. Lastly, we're starting sort of bi-weekly tenant strategy calls, which is for anyone who's interested in organizing either within your own community or helping work around policy, be that statewide, city level, in Seattle as well as other cities. Would just love to hear what folks are interested in working on and support you. So I will go ahead and put the link to sign up for those meetings in the chat. Thank you so much for squeezing me in at the end, and thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving that information. And we're going to be talking a little bit more around a lot of those areas too. did we have at least one question that we can answer? I want to, even though we're pressed for time right now, I do want to at least answer one question.
Thanks, Taylor. Yeah, Sarah asked in the chat earlier if there was any defense against landlords that were planning on increasing the rent price after the moratorium ended in a way to force tenants to move out. An example was that a landlord is threatening to raise the rent over $500 in the hopes that the tenant will move out. And is there a defense against that?
Is there a speaker that would like to address that?
I can try. So the tough thing, I mean, to start with, your landlord does have to give you some amount of notice, and you would have to be on a month-to-month tenancy in most situations. Obviously, if you're in a subsidized housing unit or public housing unit, your rent goes up and down with your income, and there are different rules regarding that. But for if you are on a month-to-month, your landlord usually has to provide 60 days notice to increase your rental amount, but there's not a strict limit as to how much they can increase. And that's because Washington State doesn't have, or, there's a statewide ban on rent control statutes or local ordinances that might cause those sorts of restrictions to be implemented by, like, the city of Seattle, for example. And I think that's sort of what Helena might have been getting at with the talk about emergency rent control. Right now, it's illegal in the state of Washington, and unfortunately, it was one of the things that didn't get addressed with the recent legislative session. So there is potentially defenses to increasing the rent. Dulcie talked about some of them earlier. For example, if the property is not registered, not up to code, there might be some ways of saying that the rent increase would be a retaliatory action. But there's not like an absolute defense that if the landlord wants to increase the rent, the general default rule is that they have the right to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for answering that. Unfortunately, we need to take a quick break and let people just go to the bathroom, drink water, whatever you need to do, and be back in like 3 minutes, because we're going to have one more renters' rights information, and then we have our great panel speakers will be here. So please take a quick break.
Don't fall in. I don't need fishing you out. gentle hands. Oh, I love you.
All right, a couple of minutes have gone by. We will come back and share our last renter's rights, even though these amazing little kittens are too much. Yenny. Thank you.
All right, definitely needed that kitten break. Thanks y'all for being here. I know it's a lot to be here when it's such a sunny day, and I'm really glad that we got to hear from so many people with really helpful information. I'm going to share one final renter's right before we hear from our very gracious speakers. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about repairs and our rights to having our rental units repaired as renters. And we are going to do a few poll questions throughout this next couple minutes, just to find out what people do already know about their rights. And we'll make sure to provide you with the facts so that you can be empowered to move forward as you need to. So according to the Housing and Building Maintenance Code, the owner of a housing unit must make repairs to keep the unit in the same condition as when the tenant moved in. Obviously, that's going to be aside from wear and tear, right? Like normal stuff where you have scrapes on the carpet from the door or whatever. That stuff's normal. But anything that is more extreme, the landlord has to repair. So, and I know that concerns about repairs are something that have come up a lot during the eviction moratorium. We've had a lot of folks ask whether or not they can request repairs in their apartment if they are behind on rent. So we're going to throw up the first poll. Yep, there it is, just about that question. So yeah, just choose what you think is the right answer and we'll talk about it.
All right.
Okay, so yes, correct. Yes, as a renter, you always retain the right to livable housing, whether or not you are on a payment plan or behind on paying your rent. There are going to be some options that you can choose. There are some options you can take to begin a repair process yourself if you are completely caught up on your rent and your utilities payment. But that's sort of a separate conversation. That is going to, that's a whole other conversation. So, excuse me. So yes, you absolutely have the right to request repairs. And the process for repairs is always going to begin with you as the renter, right? A landlord isn't necessarily going to know that something is broken or that needs repair in your unit. And so when you realize you have an issue in that unit that needs to be repaired, it's your responsibility to let them know in writing. Again, like we learned from Dulcie and from Marilyn, we always want to have our communications with landlords in writing, right? We need those receipts. So you would always you would not want to communicate with your landlord and a property manager if you have one in writing and say, you know, this is my, oh no, okay, we're a little bit ahead on the poll. Hold on. Okay, well, cool. So we were getting ahead, but yes, that's the next question I was going to ask, which is, what is the timeline that they have to respond to your repairs after you begin and provide that written request? There's multiple right answers on this one, so you can choose as many as you think are correct. All right, I'm gonna end the poll there. But yes, so if I am, once I have sent my written request to my landlord and property manager, and I've included maybe anyone else who lives in the unit, definitely kept a copy for myself. Once I've sent that to them and they've seen, you know, they've received my written request, they have only 24 hours to begin the repair process for anything related to, you know, lack of hot or cold water, electricity, heat, or anything that's life-threatening, any kind of safety issue. They have 72 hours for repair of anything related to like your food or hygiene. So like the refrigerator, the stove or the oven, or any kind of major plumbing fixture. And then for any other repairs, they have 10 days to respond. So that's something that you can, yeah, the 48 hours for plumbing issue, that was a trick question. I apologize for being tricky, but so I, even at like in my own situation, I had to request, I made a request and my landlord and the property management didn't respond for up to 3 weeks before beginning the repair process. And it took another month after that before the repair was actually completed. And had I, you know, because I knew about that 10-day rule, because of this job, I was able to, you know, negotiate a little bit. And they actually gave me and my partner half off of our following month's rent as a sort of reconciliation attempt. But I wouldn't have had that offered to me had I not known that I have the right to have my needs met in a particular given time. So we have one more poll on repairs. And it is just, yeah, the last one about, you know, refusing to pay rent if my landlord has not responded to my repair requests. All right, I'm gonna end the poll there. So this is a little bit of a tricky one. Of course, during the eviction moratorium, you know, this doesn't exactly apply in the same way that it does under normal circumstances, under non-pandemic circumstances. So if you refuse to pay rent as a retaliation to your landlord or as a message you want to send for them not responding to repairs, that is actually going to be just cause for, that could be just cause for eviction. So you want to always pay rent if you can. You know, that, yeah, you even if they haven't made the repairs that you need to make. Yeah. So that is that information that I have. I saw there were a few questions in there. Kelsey, if you could pull any out, that'd be great.
Yeah, a few around landlords dragging their feet when it comes to repairs. If an SPC I notice has already been delivered, but it doesn't speed up the process, is there another step that can be taken?
Great question. So that is something, you know, I think Dulcie already left. Oh no, she's right there. I don't know if she can respond to that briefly.
Sure. So if it's something that's like lack of water or electricity or heat, or like a major sewage something that would need to be fixed within 24 to 48 hours and it isn't, then as DCI, we would require the landlord to pay relocation assistance to the tenant if the situation wasn't repaired within a very short timeline. For less serious things, where we might give 30 days to comply, those would be fairly de minimis things though, like maybe replacing broken knobs on a cabinet or I don't know. I mean, I can't think off the top of my head now, but a lot of things. I mean, sometimes when an inspector goes to a house for an inspection, not only are they going to look at what the tenant is complaining about, but some inspectors, depending on the inspector, will take a good look at everything. And there might be a laundry list of small little things, but that take time, and they might go on the notice of violation too. So anything that's really like hazardous to health and safety, we usually push the landlord really hard to take care of it right away. The other stuff might take a bit longer, but you know, you could always negotiate, which is what you did, Katrina, and that's always something I encourage tenants to do, because there is an argument that your unit is suffering diminished value if it's not functioning in the way you pay for it to function. And so you can always try and negotiate with the landlord, or if you feel very strongly, you can go to small claims court too. So there are some other options, but really the city, us, the department's your best bet and your strongest advocate, not for you, but for the code. So, you know, and we can make them pay, we can sue them. So they generally will do what we tell them to do when we tell them to do it.
Thank you. I'm gonna move us along. I know that there is another question around the roof, and a leaky roof, which also goes to Dulcie's org. So please definitely Jess let Dulcie connect with them, and I will connect with you again. All right, so unfortunately, we need to move forward. We have lots of questions. I know we have them in there, and we will collect all these questions and answer them as soon as we can via email. We'll reach out also, and you always can connect with LGBTQ allyship or any of the great orgs. We will be giving you all of the information that you need after our event today. But in the meantime, I would like to say thank you to Katrina for that great repair information, and Dulcie for answering that question. And for the last hour, well, it's looking like a half hour, we're excited to have an amazing panel here to talk to you about statewide policies, eviction protection, housing discrimination, and other landlord-tenant issues faced by the LGBTQ community, and information around Stay Housed, Stay Healthy campaign. I would like to welcome Representative Nicole Macri, who represents the 43rd Legislative District in Washington, covering Fremont and Phinney Ridge. She serves as a vice chair on the Healthcare and Wellness Committee, and is a member of the Appropriates and Finance Committees. And she's also a member of the Washington State's LGBTQ caucus. Representative Macri has championed progressive causes on issues around affordable housing, homelessness, and has been on the forefront of the Housing First movement nationally. We're also excited to have Jesse Goethe, Greatja, thank you, who is a community legal resource manager at Q Law Foundation of Washington, working on connecting LGBTQ community organizations and currently focused on housing law, especially after the eviction moratorium ends, as well as housing discrimination and other landlord and tenant issues faced by LGBTQ community. Jesse is an active member of the local urban Native community and QT BIPOC communities in Seattle area. He identifies as Indigenous, Latinx, immigrant, Two-Spirit, transmasculine, and is a father of his 2 children. And lastly, I want to introduce Matthew Lang. Matthew is a lead organizer of Transit Writers Union, Climate Justice Chair of Standing Against Foreclosure and Eviction, Legislative Director of King County and Young Democrats, and an educator, to name just a few of the amazing things that he is doing. Matthew grew up in King County and has past lived experience of eviction and homelessness that he draws on to fuel the work that he does alongside the Stay House, Stay Healthy Coalition, pushing our legislators to enact greater renter protections and legal defenses. We are so grateful that each of you, of our speakers, are joining us to share important information and experience on a sunny Saturday. We would like to have each panelist talk for about, I said originally 10 minutes. If you could break it down just a little bit more, and then each of you will open it up for a discussion. So thank you. We'll start off with
we're going to start off with Jesse, I think, because Representative Macri is not.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
If that's okay with you, Jesse. Do you need
that works for me.
Cool.
I'm gonna share my screen. Hopefully that will work.
Actually, I think Taylor maybe needs to make
it's
co-host.
It's still not?
Yeah, it's not letting me actually.
That is so weird.
And I know in like the chat, I wasn't seeing co-host by my name. I have the button, but when I do it, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Hold on 1 second then.
Okay.
Just minutes. Sorry about that. I swear I did it like 3 times.
Yeah, we were chatting about it. We thought we had it good.
Yes, there you are.
Okay, let's try again. Looks like it's going to work. There we go. Oops. Okay. I am Jesse Goethe. I am from Q Law Foundation of Washington. And what I'm going to be covering briefly is overview of our communities, how COVID has impacted housing challenges that have always been there. But then COVID has just made everything, magnified everything. Common housing issues, and then something that we're working on and we'd love to get your feedback on as well. First, briefly want to acknowledge that we are on Coast Salish land, specifically the land of the Duwamish. And see the slide, I'm gonna keep it brief today, but always want to acknowledge that. Also want to note that none of the information that that I'm providing in this presentation via the slides or verbally constitutes legal advice, nor the creation of an attorney-client relationship. So I am legal staff, but I'm not an attorney. And again, this is not meant to be legal advice, but meant to be helpful. If you need legal advice, we have a free LGBTQ plus legal clinic, and there's our website or our phone number. So just a little bit, if you weren't aware of some of the statistics around LGBTQ plus people in Washington state. I know even though I'm part of the community, I wasn't necessarily aware of all of this. Current statistics are that we're 4.2% of the overall population. 29% of us are POC, 28% raising children, 57% under the age of 35, 25% food insecure, and 22% with an annual income less than 24,000. And then COVID, like I said, we have the existing poverty, and then it's made everything worse nationally and locally. So some housing challenges that are specific to our community, because we unfortunately tend to have employment discrimination and other marginalizations, more likely to unfortunately not have some of the things that are needed to rent some places, to own homes. As far as renting, it could be a challenge to have the acceptable credit score, to have proof of income that sometimes they ask even like 3 times the rent, to have money saved up for moving costs. Specifically in the city of Seattle, there's an ordinance where payment plans must be offered for those move-in costs. But in practice, they can also just say, I'm going to rent to somebody else that has the money, all upfront. Official previous rental history, if we've been living with other people, maybe on lease or not on, there aren't leases, things like that, not having that official rental history that they want to have. And in some cases, if there's homophobic, transphobic parents, et cetera, not having parents who are willing to co-sign that other people might have the privilege of. And then the due to that tend to be in rental housing. Homeownerships is a little bit lower than general population, tend to live with roommates rather than family. It's not uncommon to be living in non-standard rental situations, like somebody knows somebody in community that really needs a place and they converted their garage, or some creative solution that gets a person housed, but not a standard rental situation. More likely to experience rental discrimination and then fear doing anything about that because of fear of retaliation or having trouble finding new housing, for the reasons I put on the previous slide. And then we're likely to experience, we've seen in our legal clinic, shadow evictions, where the landlord isn't in a position to legally evict someone, but they don't want that person there. And so they do various new, they create a situation where the person just would rather leave than stay, and get rid of the person that way, basically evicting, but not actually using the legal process. And most impacted are people who are trans, non-binary, QT, BIPOC people, and people with disabilities. Evictions. So as some of the other speakers have said too today, we have that rent moratorium that's kind of holding the floodgates back for a few more moments, but just until the end of June. So some of the things we're looking at, as many other orgs, is how do we prepare for that? How do we help our community get through that time that we know we're just about to experience? So there's rental assistance, also negotiating payment plans with landlords, and then, as I said, shadow evictions are continuing. So one of the things that we've found that helps with that is knowing rights. So if renters know what's legal and not legal, that can really help. And then doing negotiations, whether it's about repairs or a lease extension, that actually can be effective sometimes. And then the new right to counsel that's going to apply to low income and some special populations is also definitely on our radar. And then housing discrimination. So that's a big thing, unfortunately, for our community. And it can happen at all different points from different people. For example, when applying to rent, one of the things that we find that's helpful for people to think about is what did you share when applying? And maybe you didn't officially share it, but you brought your kids along, or you were talking, or you're a masculine person and you were using he, him pronouns referring to like, oh yeah, my partner, what information did they get that they may or may not be using, in a way to discriminate against you. And like when it comes to landlords, a good way to kind of judge, is it just me, or is this, what's going on here, is are tenants with other identities treated better? Sometimes landlords are, not that great across the board, but if there's other tenants with other identities that are being treated better, that could be an indication of housing discrimination. And then it also can occur with housemates. A lot of people in our population, including myself at times, have lived in like queer group housing. So we see that in our legal clinic, generally around like escalation of conflict, in-group, out-group dynamics, harassment. And then one of the things we've been doing, which has been great, is we've been meeting with organizations across the state. And one of the things we're hearing from LGBTQ+ orgs that we're talking to is people in our community getting anti-harassment complaints filed against them. So neighbors filing things against them. And again, when you're trying to think of housing discrimination, is it like, are they doing noise complaints only against you? People with other identities doing the same things, there's no complaints. And then, like I said, the misuse of the anti-harassment order legal process. So I'm finishing up because I know we're short on time, but we're working on a housing guide for LGBTQ+ community. And it's amazing, and I'm so glad that we have so many different organizations out there, the Tenants Union, Housing Justice Project, Allyship, and across the state. So what we're trying to do is provide specifically for LGBTQ+ community, common situations in our community, and then how the law applies. Things like, can my landlord do this? What if I'm not given lease documents? I'm getting evicted. I can't make rent. Maybe you can make rent, but you're in a group house and there's other housemates that can't. What's the best thing to do there? Discrimination. And then we're also, the legal process has its place and can be helpful, but we're also really trying to focus on resolving things outside of the court system. So we'll have information in there about documenting things in case you do need to go to court or you do need it in negotiation or something, writing a letter, whether that's to the landlord, to the neighbor, negotiating with the landlord. And then, like I said, there's amazing resources already out there. So we're going to be having links to those so people can kind of know everything that's out there. And Q Law, we're based in Seattle, but we serve statewide. So there'll be statewide information. And then, and that's not out yet, but when it is out, we'll post it to our website, our Twitter, our Instagram, our Facebook, and I put our, how you find us on our social media at Q Law Foundation, all one word. But then when there are time for questions, our question back, and you can feel free to contact me too. I'll drop my contact info in the chat, is what else would you like to see? This is something we're developing now. So like, is there something else that you'd like to see included, or like, oh, I hope they put this situation in it, or what are you seeing that's not out there, whether, as an individual or as an org that you'd like to see. So that is my information. That's the information I have for you all. Also if you need something more immediate or specific, Al's given information and I'll give her information as well. And we also have a one-pager that's going to be sent out in the materials afterwards. But we have our legal clinic, and these days it's all remote via phone. So it makes it a little more convenient, and you can sign up on our website, or if needed, you can call our phone line as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. That's a lot of information in such short amount of time, and I know there will be questions. And then our next panel speaker would be Matthew.
Hi there. Thank you all for having me. really appreciate being here today in fellowship with all of you and working towards some stronger renter protections and eviction protections as we move forward. I'm here specifically to talk about our legislation that's being moved right now at the King County and Seattle City level. So just to give a little bit of a framework, we don't have a lot of data as far as how LGBTQ plus folks are affected by evictions. There was a study done in 2018 by the Seattle Women's Commission called Losing Home, which reported that there was a majority of folks who are femme presenting who are experiencing evictions, as well as a majority of Black, Indigenous, people of color who are experiencing evictions, and that people who live marginalized identities are at higher risk no matter what. So working from that place, the same study talked about how 62% of all evictions led to homelessness. So I want to frame this a little bit around homelessness, right? Because that's what we're trying to avoid at the end, right? This is preventing evictions, preventing folks from losing home in the first place is the key to making sure that people don't become homeless, right? So in the 2020 point in time count, which is where one night out of the year, it's a really weird way to do our homeless metrics, but in the 2020 point in time count of the entire homeless population, 18% of the chronically homeless population identified as LGBTQ plus, and 10% of the non-chronic homeless population, people who just become homeless, did so. So that's 28% of the entire homeless population. And considering what Jesse just brought to us as a statistic that 5.2% of the entire population of the King County metro area is LGBTQ identifying, shows a vast disparity, right? And then of that group, the homeless youth population, 28% of that population also identified as LGBTQ identifying. So as an educator who has currently, I have multiple students who are gender nonconforming or trying to search, right? You know, they're 6, 7, 8 years old, right? And I see a very distinct path between those two. There's the folks who have a lot of support from their parents in their questioning, in their searching, and then the folks who don't. And over the past few years, really seeing that difference and seeing how that's affected the mental health, how that's affected the reality of these children. You know, where in society are we starting from? Like this is the issue in itself. So that youth population, it's a huge piece, right? Because people who become homeless at an early age tend to find themselves back in homelessness throughout their time there. So moving on to what we're doing to prevent that from happening, right? There's been a lot of great speakers today who have given us a lot of wisdom around how to protect yourself in the current laws and how to make sure that you're staying housed. But we're trying right now to make it greater. So we in the Stay Housed, Stay Healthy Coalition, and I'm going to drop some links on you, so definitely watch the chat while I'm speaking. Here is the website for the Stay Housed, Stay Healthy Coalition, and I'm going to share screen for a moment. Oh, I am disabled from sharing screen, so if you can make that a thing, that would be lovely. But what we are really focusing on here is just cause evictions at the Seattle level, making sure that we are closing down the loophole for fixed term leases. So this means at the end of a 1-year fixed term lease, you might be able to, as a landlord, you might be able to just say, hey, we're going in a different direction, and you're not the tenant we need anymore. So we're going to move on and terminate this lease at the end of the contract. So that in itself is an eviction. And we're working with Councilmember Temi Morales, as well as co-sponsors Andrew Lewis and Shama Sawant, to make sure that that is a closed loophole. We are also working to make sure that there's legal defense when you find yourself in an eviction process that protects people from eviction when it is a COVID-related economic hardship, right? So we are working at those levels at the city level, as well as there's a piece of legislation that is working its way through right now that would make sure that families who have students in the Seattle public school system and educators cannot become homeless themselves during the school year, which is a big thing, considering that about 10% of the entire Seattle public school student body is homeless in some way, whether they're doubling up, whether they are living in an RV or a car, whether they are in any sort of housing insecurity. So that's a huge piece. As far as the county goes, and I won't go too much longer because I know we are pressed for time, but we are working with council members Gurmai Zahalai, as well as Jean Cole Wells, to make sure that we are ending a lot of these just cause issues in unincorporated King County, right? So often places like White Center and Skyway are excluded from a lot of the Seattle city things, even though they deal with the same issues that are being dealt with in the rest of urban Seattle. So we are working with the county to make sure that there are just cause protections to cap move-in fees and allow payment plans, which are allowed in Seattle, but not in unincorporated King County, to cap late fees at a 1% of monthly rent. So if you were paying $1,000 a month in rent, your late fee for being late on rent could only be $10. Longer notice for large rent increases is a big piece that we're working on as well, making sure that if you have to pay more rent, that it's not just a 30 or 20-day notice, that something like a 4-month notice is required. Make sure that there's no rent hikes in unsafe or unlivable conditions, and ability to adjust a rent due date, as well as at the city and county level, making sure that folks are not being screened based on their credit score. That's a big piece as well, because folks who have an eviction on the record or are experiencing a low credit score themselves have much harder time of finding housing in that way. So I'm going to wrap up here, but I'm going to share an event with you. We have an in-person socially distanced rally that's happening this Friday, the 21st, and that is led by Councilmember Temi Morales' office. It's going to start at the City Hall Plaza and move to surround the King County Courthouse, where evictions actually take place. And I just dropped the link there in the chat. And then an immediate action that you could take, we are asking folks to, share a quote with us, share their headshot if they are willing and or able, and we're working on really driving a social media campaign to make sure that the word for these legislative priorities is getting out and that there's vast support from the community. So if you are interested in being one of those people and have the ability to do that, I'm dropping the link there for that form where you can easily just put your quote in, put your photo in, and we'll share if you're able and are willing. So thank you again for this time. I think it's probably time for me to stop talking, and people, I've seen a lot of questions happening in the chat. So
thank you so much, Matthew. Yes, questions that are in the chat. We'd love to hear.
Two questions surfaced. One is around the obligation that a landlord has if one tenant is being harassed by another tenant on race, sexuality, gender. And on the same note, in a different category, are there legal retaliations that a tenant can make if they are being harassed by the landlord?
I'm guessing that might be directed at me. Not being a lawyer, and it really depends on, situations. So I can't give like specific advice, but I do recommend our legal clinic. And then also I will work with the attorneys to try to get as much detail as possible into our guide that might be helpful in weeding it out as much as possible for community in general, but I can't really speak to specifics. So.
Thank you. And another question, I don't know if you're able to answer, maybe Matthew, but how often are cases that are brought against landlords won in court? Is it worth it to engage?
Yeah, that's a
go ahead.
Matthew might have some information. I was just going to say that's a really good question. I don't have the statistics for us, like how our legal clinic works is we have volunteer attorneys that come in and give people consultation for proceeding. In some cases we do litigation, but we don't have the bandwidth for that for much. But the Housing Justice Project, I believe, is the one that offers counsel for people going through the eviction process. So they or Matthew might have more details.
Yeah, so from the same referenced study that I was talking about, Losing Home by the Seattle Women's Commission, and the house, it was actually done as well by the King County Bar Association, who houses the Housing Justice Project. It was shown that folks that did come with legal representation to an eviction proceeding had a much greater chance of being able to fight and avoid an eviction. So whereas, if you don't come with any legal representation, I think it was 90% of folks did actually end up being evicted. That number was reduced by about 30%. When they were able to come with some sort of legal representation, which is why the right to counsel that has been passed at the state, as well as our city level, which is a little bit stronger, is so important.
Those are all the questions that I saw surface in the chat.
Yeah, I also, I saw some other question in the chat around the right, around with the going to court, and if, let's see, where is this? How often do cases against landlords are won? Or does it cost to even go to court? And with the moratorium, I find if they're going to be doing the eviction moratorium cases, my question would be around that, going to court, and if there's fees, and what is, if we're still not going to be able to show up in person, how is that being processed? What's the process?
I think the first part was already answered, but I think it's a good question to ask. If you do end up going to court and losing, can your landlords then make you pay their legal fees? Is that a risk that tenants take when they choose to take action?
I don't have any specific information, and I'm sure I don't want to speak for Jesse, but you know, I'm not a lawyer myself, so can't provide that quite legal advice.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Alan and I have to be really careful as non-lawyers, but just generally speaking, you know, in legal cases, filing fees can sometimes be waived. If you're low income, you know, there's there's a process, a very, like, you just go to a judge with a form and you can get it at the clerk's office in some cases to waive the filing fee if you're low income, and ask the judge to do that. And in some cases, depending on how the case turns out, the judge can like order, you know, the losing party, which maybe, you know, hopefully would be your landlord, to pay fees. But yeah, it really varies and depends. But like with our legal clinic, we can, you know, given the specifics of people's situation, point them at resources. And, you know, fortunately there are, you know, like Al said, some pro bono or, you know, free options out there, depending on the specifics.
Great, thank you.
And Taylor, you tagged me a little bit, but I didn't want to interrupt the speakers. So I am an attorney, and I mean, again, I'm not anyone here's attorney right now, but just to sort of generally answer the question. So current, one of the revisions of landlord tenant law that happened a couple of years ago was that you're not supposed to be charged your landlord's attorney's fees in a non-payment of rent case if you owe less than 2 months of rent or $1,200, whichever is greater. You know, for some low-income renters who might be in a subsidized housing situation, you know, $1,200 might actually be several months worth of rent. But for, I think, most people who are just paying market-based rent, that's like that is the protection if you have to go to court for a non-payment of rent case after the moratorium ends, and you don't owe more than 2 months, you shouldn't be charged your landlord's fees in that situation.
Thank you. Yeah, I figure why not pull the attorney in that can answer that. So I also want to, unfortunately, I want to recognize that unfortunately, Representative Nicole McRae couldn't join us, but we wanted to state that thank you to the lovely panelists, and sorry that things have gotten so short at the end of the day of a 3-hour event, which, as you can tell, is jam-packed with great information because there's a lot going on. And it is because all these, I want to recognize that all these great ordinance that have passed, these laws that have passed during the moratorium, is because of advocacy from organizations and people like you that attend and tell us these stories. So I know that Matthew said, please share a story if you have one, or let us know. That is really important. You have to share your information, your story around what has affected you, so that the representatives do know what is happening on the ground. What do you need changed? What is, with the new laws that have passed to help protect you as a renter. So please share your stories. Make sure that the representatives know why it's so important that we stay housed and that we stay in secure housing. It's 4 o'clock. It's a lovely day outside. I don't want to take any more anybody's time. So what I would like to say is I want to definitely thank our North Seattle Housing Committee, Mallory and Kels, Trisha, and Barbara. Could not have done this without you. You helped us plan this and brought all these great people. I want to thank our volunteers today, because we're a small staff and our volunteers are important to us. So Kelsey and Tim, thank you so much for being in the background. Always thank you to Katrina and Yenny. I can't do any of this work without the staff that I work with. They're fantastic at LGBTQ allyship and all the hard work that we all put in. If you are interested in being a volunteer or interested in one of our committees, we have housing committees, senior housing committee, Barbara's on it. We have a renters' rights committee, Kelsey and I believe Tim are both on that. And we also have a worker rights, LGBTQ plus worker rights committee. I run those. And if you're interested in any of those, we're putting them in the chat. If you're interested in being a volunteer with LGBTQ allyship, please let us know. You can email me directly, taylor@allyship.org. Thank you to our amazing partner organizations that shared this great information with you all. And I could name them all, but we've ran out of time. And hats off and wonderful thank you to our speakers, Jesse and Matthew, for being here and giving information to our community. Please go enjoy the sun. Oh, and one last big thank you to our sponsor, Housing Development Consortium. I want to thank you all for being here. Enjoy the sun. We will be sending you the information. If not today, we will send it first thing Monday morning, and you can watch this on YouTube. So, adios.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the sun. Bye.
Thank you for the great questions.
Yes, and thank you all for speaking. Really appreciate it. Okay. Bye, y'all. Thank you. Enjoy your
Bye.
weekend.